The views and opinions expressed on this podcast is solely of the creator and may not necessarily reflect the views, thoughts, or opinions of the listener. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. Chat, GPTs, and AI technologies are not used or harmed in the creation of this podcast. This podcast is 100% human-made by me, your host. Hi, hello. My name is Melanie, and this is Under the Moon Paranormal Presents Ohio Legends, the podcast about the Buckeye State that brings you all the history, lore, and legends in and around Ohio. So join me, won't you? So tonight is March 3rd's full moon, which is also a lunar eclipse. So around 3:33 a.m. on March 3rd, and the timing alone feels intentional because there's so much energy and cosmic stuff happening. We just reached the Lunar New Year. It's the year of the fire horse. So March's full moon is traditionally the worm moon, the point where the earth starts to wake up again and things begin to move under the surface before we can fully see them. That in-between space feels important right now. What really stands out to me is the 333. 3 has a way to symbolize balance in creation, mind, body, spirit, and seeing it repeat like that feels like quite the confirmation rather than a warning, more like a pause where things are starting to line up. This doesn't feel like a loud or chaotic full moon to me. It feels steady, rooted, almost private. A moon that reveals what's ready to move forward rather than forcing anything to end. And for me, this moon is about calling energy back, setting firmer boundaries, and being more selective about where my attention goes. Less explaining, less negotiating, more clarity, and more self-trust. If I do anything ritual-wise this full moon, it's going to be simple. Maybe light a candle, take a few deep breaths, some clear intention, nothing dramatic. And this full moon doesn't need that. It doesn't feel like. It responds better to honesty and stillness. There's something grounding about this one, though, like a reminder that strength doesn't have to announce itself. It just knows when to step forward and when to say, yeah, So full moon blessings to you all and happy Lunar New Year. This is when I typically celebrate New Year's. I don't really celebrate it on New Year's Eve. I see the wheel of the year turning, and this is the New Year when the world, the earth starts to wake up from being asleep all winter. So that's your full moon report. So for the season finale, we are going to do part 2 to the sports curse in Ohio. We talked about the Bengals in the last episodes. We're going to close it out, and season 4 will be a brand new thing. We might do like a strange news article after the full moon report before we start the history lesson and the local lore of the episodes. So tell me what you think in the comments about that, because a lot of crazy things happening in the world in general, not just in Ohio. Okay, so here we go. Cleveland sports curse. Let's talk about it, shall we? So a sports superstition involving the city of Cleveland, not just one in particular sport. It's the whole city of Cleveland. Major League professional sports teams centered on the failure to win championships in any other major league sport for 52 years. From 1964 to 2016, 3 major league teams based in Cleveland contributed to belief in the curse. The Browns of the National Football League, the Cavaliers of the National Basketball Association, and the Indians of the Major League Baseball. Okay. The championship drought began after the Browns defeated the Baltimore Colts in the 1964 NFL Championship game, 2 seasons before the first Super Bowl. The city's professional sports team included a short-lived Barons franchise of the National Hockey League, then went to unprecedented 147 combined seasons without a championship. The drought ended when the Cavaliers beat the Golden State Warriors in Game 7 in the 2016 NBA Finals by overcoming 1-3 series deficit, an event widely interpreted as having broken this curse. So we'll see about that. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the Cleveland Browns. Much of the discussion of the curse is centered on the NFL's Cleveland Browns, who have not won a championship since 1964 and have suffered a series of questionable coaching decisions, disappointing losses, and draft busts. So before Art Model became majority owner of the team, the Browns had dominated the NFL and the earlier All-American Football Conference, winning 7 championships in 17 years. After 3 non-playoff seasons, the 1964 Browns team finished 10-3-1 and appeared in the 1964 NFL championship game against a heavily favored Baltimore Colts, a team coached by Don Shula with the pro NFL Hall of Fame quarterback Johnny Unitas. If I'm mispronouncing these guys' names, I apologize, okay? As its signal caller, the Browns beat the Colts 27-0 at the Cleveland Stadium. This particular Browns team consisted of many players initially drafted and acquired by Paul Brown. As we mentioned, Paul Brown is the person that started the Cincinnati Bengals. The Browns' former longtime head coach and architect of the team's earlier successes, who had been fired by Model in early 1963. During the next 30 years in Cleveland, not a single Model of team won a league or conference title, although that they did appear in 7 NFL American Football Conference Championship games. So the Browns returned to the NFL championship game in 1965, where they lost to the Green Bay Packers in the spring of 1966. The star running back Jim Brown was cast in the film The Dirty Dozen. Brown went to England to take part of the filming, which then suffered production delays due to stormy weather. So is that part of the curse too? The production delays caused Brown to miss the first part of training camp, resulting in Model firing him every day that he missed. Not one to take threats, Brown, who had won 3 MVPs and made Pro Bowl for 9 years of his career, and was the NFL's all-time leader rusher at the point, chose to retire rather than pay the fines. The Browns missed the playoffs in 1966 and were knocked out by the Cowboys 52-14 in 1967. The Browns made the NFL championship game in the 1968 but lost to the Colts 34-0. The Browns returned in 1969, losing to the Vikings 27-7. After the AFL-NFL merger, the Browns were placed in the AFC. There, the Browns made 2 playoff trips in 1971 and in 1972, but suffered early exits both times. So, the Browns did not return to the playoffs until 1980, trailing by 2 points to the Oakland Raiders and in a field goal range with less than 1 minute remaining in the AFC divisional playoff game. The Browns executed a passing play that was intercepted in the end zone. The play called the Browns head coach Sam Ugalat. I'm sorry if I mispronounced this guy's name. Rutgilanio? I'm not very good at pronouncing names. You all know that. He has been known as the Red Right 88. The Raiders later then went to win that season's Super Bowl. In 1986, the Browns were 1 game away from playing in what would have been the franchise's first Super Bowl when they fell short in one of the most memorable games in NFL history. The Browns were leading the Denver Broncos 20-13 in the fourth quarter when the Broncos quarterback John Elway led a 98-yard game-tying drive in just over 5 minutes. The game went into overtime and the Broncos kicked a field goal to seal the victory. Elway's fourth quarter march and the game itself became known as The Drive, a title that both signifies Elway's brilliance and the clutch in the Browns' inability to close out important games. The Browns and the Broncos both returned to the AFC Championship game the next year, with the Browns down 38-31 in the fourth quarter. Browns running back Ernest Biner was handed the ball by near the goal line. Biner, who was in the midst of a great performance, was stripped of the ball, and the Broncos recovered on their second-yard line. The Broncos surrendered an intentional safety and went on to win 38-33, while Biner's blunder became known as the fumble. The Browns returned to the AFC Championship game in 1989, losing again to the Broncos. And as of 2024, and just this last year, the Browns have not returned to the AFC Championship game since one and remain one of the 4 teams to never play in a Super Bowl, along with the Detroit Lions, the Houston Texans, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there's that. A little bit more about the Browns. We're really going to dive into the Browns because this Cleveland curse, it's bigger than the Cincinnati Bengals Bo Jackson curse. The Browns were at the center of a relocation conservative in 1995, and the decision by then the Browns owner Art Model to move the Browns, which had been an 11-5 team the previous season, to Baltimore. Infuriated and confused Brown fans after negotiating with the NFL and the city of Cleveland, Model was allowed to move the sports team personnel to Baltimore, but where it became its new franchise known as the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens won a Super Bowl in only their 5th year of existence, doing so with the former Browns tight end Ozzie Newsome as their general manager. In addition to Newsome's success, Coach Bill Belichick, who was fired as Browns head coach soon after in the 1995 season, became the head coach of the New England Patriots 5 years later. With the Patriots, Belichick coached only 4 losing seasons and won 9 AFC championships and 6 Super Bowls. The struggles of the Browns since rejoining the NFL, as well as the success of both Newsome and Belichick, were chronicled in the NFL films in a feature called A Football Life, 1995 Cleveland Browns. So that's some bit of craziness right there. It's like they went with their gut and moved the team, right? They probably would have won and the curse would have been broken if they moved out of Ohio. What do you think about that? So the Browns returned to the NFL in 1999 after a 3-year period of deactivation. In the 1999 NFL draft, the Browns selected Tim Couch, hoping he would be the franchise quarterback. Ty Detmer was brought in to usher in the planned Couch era. But after a string of dismissal performances by Detmer, Couch was thrust into the starting position. Couch struggled to perform without a talented roster around him, which led him to eventual departure from the Browns after 2003. The Browns could have selected Kurt Warner in the 1999 expansion draft, as the St. Louis Rams left him unprotected. However, the Browns chose not to do so. Warner would go on to win the Most Valuable Player award in time and in 2001 seasons, and also helped the Rams win the Super Bowl. The Browns suffered through losing seasons in their first 3 seasons after their return, but returned to the playoffs in 2002, losing to the Patriots Steelers in the wild card round despite having 24 lead in the third quarter of that game. The Browns would not have another winning season until 2007, when they went from 10-6. The Browns missed the playoffs because they lost their divisional tiebreaker to the Steelers on the account of a head-to-head sweep and the wild card tiebreaker to the Titans based on a head-to-head coach record against common opponent. Damn. So in the 2010s, the 2011 NFL draft, the Browns held on the 6th overall pick but traded with the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons would use to pick to select Julio Jones, while the Browns used the 3rd overall pick in 2012 to select Trent Richardson. Jones would go on to be considered one of the best wide receivers of the 2010s with Atlanta, while Richardson only appeared in 17 games before being traded to the Colts in 2013. It's just like they always have a string of bad luck. The Browns used the 1st-round pick that they received from the Colts to select Johnny Manziel, whose career was overshadowed by numerous off-field issues and playing in his last game in 2015. On November 30th, 2015, the Browns played the Baltimore Ravens in their first Monday Night Football game in 6 years. After trailing 17-3, second quarter, the Browns rallied behind quarterbacks John McCown and Austin Davis to tie the game at 27 with 1:47 seconds left. The Browns cornerback Tamron Williams intercepted a pass at a midfield with 50 seconds left. The Browns attempted a 51-yard field goal with 3 seconds left to win the game, only to see the attempt blocked and returned by the Ravens safety Will Hill for a touchdown, handing the Browns their most painful loss in recent history. I would say so. That sounds awful. The event was called The Block. So, like, everything that happens to these guys has a name, like The Block. It's like they have these awful things always happen to them. So the Browns' struggles continues after the curse ended in 2016, after going 1-1 in 2016. The Browns arguably hit rock bottom in the 2017 season, where under head coach Hugh Jackson, the Browns went a league worst, a franchise record worst, 0-16, becoming even the second team in NFL history even to have a 16-season game where they lost every single one of them. That was also the Detroit Lions, but every game lost every single game that season. The Browns eventually posted a winning record and returning to the playoffs in 2020 and 2023. So they're making a comeback, I'd say. So that was the Cleveland Browns. There's more to this, okay? The Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll talk a little bit about them. The Cleveland Cavaliers are a professional basketball team who have played the National Basketball Association since 1970. Over the franchise's first 16 years, the team produced just 3 winning seasons, the highlight being the 1975-76 Miracle at Richfield team, whose improbable playoff run was doomed by injury to Jim Crones. In mid-early 1980s, saw the franchise ruined by the owner, Ted's decision to trade every first-round pick the Cavaliers held for inferior talent. Wow. While those picks turned into players such as James Worthy and Derek Harper. Despite this, the Cavaliers gained respectability towards the end of the decade in the early 1990s, making the playoffs, which players such as Mark Price, Brad Daugherty, Larry Nance, Hot Rod Williams, and Craig were on the roster. In 1989, the Cavaliers faced the Chicago Bulls in the first round of playoffs. In the decision, so the Cavaliers led with 3 seconds left to play. However, the Bulls' Michael Jordan jumped over to make the game's winning shot, known as the shot. There's another name there for a play that was historically bad for the Cleveland players. And the Bulls won that game. Wow, by 1 point. Wow. Despite 6 trips to the playoffs between 1988 and 1994, the Cavaliers never made it to the NBA Finals, as Jordan's Bulls defeated them in the playoffs 5 times during that era. In 2007, Ohio native LeBron James led Cavaliers to their first NBA Final appearance. However, they were swept by the Antonio Spurs. 2 years later, Cavaliers, despite posting a conference best 66 out of 16 record, lost for the 2009 Eastern Conference Finals to Orlando Magic 4-2. In the following season playoffs, through his team always possessed home court advantage and reigned 2-time MVP James and the 2009-10 Cavaliers were defeated by visiting Boston Celtics in the Game 5 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. The Cavaliers went on to lose that series 4-2 again. So, 2010s, talk a little about the 2010s. The NBA free agent period, LeBron James was featured in a television special titled The Decision. Having notified the Cavaliers just moments prior to the television event, James announced in this fall, "I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join Miami Heat." So they lost LeBron James that year. So in those 4 years without LeBron, they acquired 3 number 1 picks, and the team struggled to win games, setting the NBA record for the most consecutive losses with 26 in the 2010-2011 season. So after 2013-2014 season, James opted out of his contract with Miami to return to the Cavaliers. After signing James, the Cavaliers traded their 2 most recent number 1 draft picks for Minnesota Timberwolves star Kevin Love. So to form its own Big Three, which rounded out by Irving, Cavaliers advanced to the 2015 NBA Finals. However, that curse is there again. Several Cavaliers players were injured during the season, very badly injured, and they didn't win. They did not win. So that's a little bit about the Cavaliers. So the Cavaliers in 2016, a 3-point shot by Kyrie Irving put the Cavaliers ahead for a good 92-89 with 53 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Following that, Cavaliers forward Kevin Love was switched and forced to play one-on-one defense against Stephen Curry. Curry tried an array of dribbles and moves and ultimately missed 3 different point attempts, with the typical slow-footed Love staying in front of the pestering Warrior guard. This game is being called the comeback and the end, as the Wind ended Northeast Ohio's 52 championship drought. So that was a drought that went on 52 years. That was over in 2016. So the Cleveland Indians, now known as the Cleveland Guardians, thank goodness they changed that name, just like the Browns and the Cavaliers, they have experienced the curse. The Indians' failure to win a World Series since 1948 has led the Cleveland scene to dub the team's shortcomings the curse of Chief Wahoo. Yep, Chief Wahoo was a Native American who served as the Indians' cap prior to being discontinued in 2018. The Chief Wahoo has been controversial. The Indians considered changing it in 1993, but the logo was retained on the home caps, like the ball caps. When I say cap, we're talking about ball caps. Okay. the jersey sleeves until about 2019 is when they kept the chief on them. In 2002, the Indians introduced a script I alternative logo and caps. So in 2011, the alternative logo was changed to Block C. The Block C became the team's primary logo beginning in 2014. So we're going to put the logos right here while I'm talking. The team ultimately dropped the Indians' name in 2022 in favor of the Guardians. The curse of Rocky Cavaldo is another phenomenon that is supposedly preventing the team from winning a World Series. I'd say just the name alone is preventing them not to win a World Series. In 1989, the film Major League was based on the Indians' poor performance in 1954, as the Indians had finished within 5 games of the playoffs just 3 times between 1955 and 1989. In 1954, the Indians had one of the greatest seasons in baseball history, winning 111 games in what was the only time from 1949 to 1958, in which the New York Yankees did not win the American League, heavily favored against the New York Giants in the World Series. The Indians seemed poised to break the game open in the top of the 8th inning in Game 1. Oh, this baseman, he hit a deep fly ball to center field since the game was held at the Polo Grounds, which was a nice 483 feet from the home plate center field. The ball remained in play, and even though it would have been a home run in any other ballpark, no look catch on the run. So yeah, since it was so big, it became known as the catch because this guy caught the ball. Giants batter Dusty Rhodes hit a walk-off home run to give the Giants the win. The Giants went on to sweep the Indians in the World Series in what became one of the biggest upsets in World Series history. In 1969, Major League Baseball expanded the postseason to introduction of division play. Indians were placed in the American League East despite the introductions of division and expanded playoffs. I'm struggling to get through the Cleveland Indians section here. So, the historic 1995 season saw the Indians win 100 games again to make it to the World Series for the first time in 41 years, but lost in Game 6 to the Atlanta Braves. So, there's that. It seems like they go a long time without... Then they win 100 games all of a sudden. It's weird. Okay. After winning division titles 6 times in 7 seasons from 1995 to 2001, Indians only appeared in postseason twice in 14 years under the often frugal Dolan family ownership. So the Indians were up 3-1. One went away from advancing to the World Series, but they lost the last 3 games to the Boston Red Sox. So there you go. They lost again. In 2013, the Indians won their final 10th games of the season to make the playoffs again, but lost to the wild card game to the Tampa Bay Rays. Bay Rays. Even after the Cavaliers in 2016 NBA title, the Indians continued to come up short in the playoffs. Later that same year, the Indians advanced to the World Series, giving Cleveland a chance to become the first city since Los Angeles 88 to have both NBA and MLB championships the same year. So the Cavaliers, they kind of broke a little bit of the curse off in 2016, and they're trying to too in 2016. That was a good year for the Cleveland sports curse, I guess. The curse was away, but all them celebrities died in 2016, though. Weird. Is that a coincidence or not? Who knows? Anyway, so in 2017, the Indians returned to the playoffs as a heavy favorite to return to the World Series. They won 102 games again. Over 100 games they won, highlighted by the American League record in a 22-game winning streak. However, the Indians lost the division series to the New York Yankees. Cleveland returned to the playoffs in 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024, and 2025, but failed to advance because they lost. Dang. Other sports to mention for this curse, okay? The Cleveland sports curse has generally centered around its major teams. However, other teams based in Cleveland won championships during city's major title drought, and one Greater Cleveland native won a world championship individually. So that's interesting. The Cleveland Crunch, an indoor soccer club, won 3 championships in the National Professional Soccer League during the 1990s. In 1994, won their first title, and the first title for any professional Cleveland team in 30 years. Defeating the St. Louis Ambush 3-1 in the best-of-5 championship series, the team went on to win 2 more titles in 1996 and 1999, before the league disbanded in 2001. The Crunch would eventually be revived in 2020, playing the Major Area Soccer League in their first season, won in the 2021 championship. That's pretty cool. Wow. Okay, so let's also talk about Lake Erie Monsters, which is a team. I'll talk about a cryptid. It's a team. On June 11, 2016, the Lake Erie Monsters of the National Hockey League won Calder Cup, defeating the Hershey Bears in Quick Loans Arena to win the series 4-0. The team, also owned by Dan Gilbert, shares its arena with the Cavaliers, who won the NBA title 8 days earlier. It was the 10th overall Calder Cup win by the Cleveland team. The original Cleveland Barons played from 1937 to 1973 and won 9 times, with the last being in 1964. Coincidentally, though, the last time one of the major sports franchises in the city won a championship prior to the 2016 Cavaliers. Stripe, this guy named Stripe, May 14, 2016, martial artist Stripe, S-T-I-P-E, and a Cleveland suburb, won the UFC heavyweight championship at UFC 198 in Brazil, knocking out Brazil's own. 3 hours prior, ESPN had aired 30 for 30 episode called Believeland, documenting Cleveland's major league title drought. The Indians and Cavaliers Twitter accounts congratulated him shortly after, and they and the Browns had earlier wished him luck. He tweeted encouragement to the Cavaliers, who hoped to keep the winning streak. Some media outlets characterize his title as having ended Cleveland's 52-year championship drought. So they think that Stripe is the one that kind of broke the curse in 2016. So that's kind of interesting. Let me know what you think about the Cleveland sports curse. It's pretty interesting stuff. It really is. So yeah, I mean, they all had problems winning until 2016. All of them. And maybe the Stripe guy is the UFC fighter. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. So, it's some spooky story time, submitted by you guys, the listener. And if you want me to read your spooky story on this podcast, send me an email, underthemanparapod@gmail.com, and I will read your story on the show. So the first story this evening comes from Jennifer, and the title was An Imitation of My Daughter. My sister has a son who sleepwalks along with other problems that he has. On weekends, she locks the door to the upstairs where the children sleep to keep them from sleepwalking out of the house and onto the main highway. Well, early Saturday morning, I was awakened by the feeling of someone standing at the foot of my bed. I looked down and saw what appeared to be my daughter. I was so sure it was her that I tapped my husband to wake him up and have him move over to let her climb in between us. I said, "Jeff, Dorothy's awake, move over." And when I looked to tell her to climb on up, she was gone. Well, the first thing I did was tell Jeff that I was going to go see what was wrong. She always climbed in bed with us. He said okay, and he would go too. Well, we walked through the dining room, the kitchen, to the stairs, but the door was still locked. It is a latch that latches from the kitchen side only. Jeff and I looked at each other, and I told him Kim must have just been up and let her out. Then when she came back into the kitchen, she let her back up. So I went into my sister Kim's room to ask her if she and her boyfriend were still asleep. So they were asleep. We went back to bed, and when my sister got up to let the kids come down the next morning, I asked Dorothy what was wrong and why she didn't climb in bed with me. She said she hadn't been downstairs yet. Being she was only 3, I figured out she was still half asleep and didn't remember coming down. So I asked my sister Dorothy. She said if she said anything to her when she let her out. My sister told me that she didn't let anyone out until just now. I eventually let it go and almost forgot that it happened, but I didn't realize that ghosts can take the form of a living person until a few years ago. It looked so much like her that it even had a pacifier in its mouth. I shortly broke her of the pacifier after that, so I couldn't be mistaken again. That's spooky. Doppelganger. Okay, so the next one is from Samantha, and it's called A Haunted Porcelain Doll at Work. I lived in our 2-story house for 3.5 years, and it said that an old man had hung himself there. That's the only thing I found out about it. Anyway, one night about 2 years ago, my mom and I were watching a movie and we heard a big bang and then we heard a baby crying. The sound came from upstairs. We were too scared to go up there, but finally decided to check it out and see what it was. I went upstairs to my room and there was no windows open. It was winter and I found nothing that may have fallen. No radio or television was on either to make a baby sound. Then one night, I went upstairs to my bedroom and my porcelain doll was moved over by my window looking outside. No one was home all day, so I don't know how the doll got there. Another thing that happened to me in this house was that my doll has a bear hanging from its hand. And I was watching a movie, Pet Cemetery, when the bear started to move. It was very scary. Also, one night my mother was getting ready for bed. She listened to the radio when she goes to bed. There was a porcelain doll on the nightstand right beside the alarm clock. The radio was on the alarm clock, but to turn it off, you have to switch the button in the back. She turned it on, and about 5 minutes later, it turned off. The time was still right, so it wasn't that the electric had gone out. She checked the switch to see if it turned and found that it was in the off position, so she turned it back on. 5 minutes later, it turned back off. Then my mom was afraid that if it was the porcelain doll, so she moved it to the other side of the room. To this day, I get afraid of what I'm going to see or hear. Well, that's spooky. I believe dolls are haunted. I really do. So this one's a short one. It's from Kaylee, and it's called Happy New Year. It was New Year's Eve, 2025. My mom and I were sitting on the floor in the living room watching TV. All of a sudden, the wreath on our door started to move and tap on the floor. There was no wind or breeze at all. A couple of years back, my uncle had died in this house. After that, whenever this happens, my mom always told me that it was my uncle's way of saying Happy New Year. Interesting. Wow. Well, thanks for your stories, guys. Hey, keep sending them in. Send them on in. I will read every single story that I get in my inbox. So, this concludes season 3 of Under the Moon Paranormal Presents Ohio Legends. Next month, for the month of April, we are starting season 4 with a new segment, Strange Ohio News. So stay tuned for that. Share this podcast with a friend that likes all things that are creepy about Ohio. And until next time, my friends, stay spooky.